So in the first video, we talked about um, the strange objects near the moon, Amoa, Amoa. Um, in the last half of that you didn't get because of Zoom crapping out on me again, which they're going to get their payment pulled if this doesn't stop. I was trying to show you that they've discovered that there's water on Mars and ice on Mars and huge channels of it, not just surface water, but also underground water. And then I was going to share with you the face on Mars and um, the pyramids that are near the face on Mars, etc. And then on into SpaceX and things being seen flying around SpaceX as the rockets are being launched and such. I don't know how much of that actually, you know, got in the video because I have to wait for them to email it to me before I can review it. So that's going to take a while, and I want to make sure I finish this video and give you all of the information that I was here to provide to you. So we're going to begin again with Granger Taylor from Canada. And this is connected to the rest. Very interesting, bizarre mysteries. And the title of this segment is Unwinding or Winding Down Some of the Roads of Unexplained Mysteries. And all of these happen to be connected or correlate with one another. We're talking about the premise of intelligent life other than planet Earth. So let's just talk about Granger for a moment. He actually left a note before he disappeared saying that he was going aboard an alien spaceship. So this person actually was on about how they've made their mission. This is the actual letter that he left behind. I've gone away to walk aboard an alien spaceship as reoccurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe and in return. I am leaving behind all my possessions to you as I will no longer will require to use any the use of any. Please use the instructions in my will as a guide to help. Now, granted, to look at this note alone, this seems awful strange that if he thinks he's going to be gone for only a 42-month voyage, why would he give all of his worldly possessions away? And why would there be instructions in his will as to what to do with them? So the mystery does remain unsolved, and I do see in this where maybe he faked his own death or something, and the instructions in the will were to, assist him in doing just that or something. I don't know. But the particular night in question that he vanished, it was reported that there was a very loud sound like an explosion and a very bright light. Hey, in there. Go in there. Thank you. This is a photograph of a tailgate of a blue Datsun pickup truck near the explosion site. I don't know why this photo is here. I didn't even notice that to begin with. So there may be something to that. But this was a man who was highly intelligent, often built his own tools and mechanisms from unconventional materials with very unconventional methods, and was very interested in all of the esoteric things, um, astrology, the paranormal, aliens, so on and so forth. So, and he spoke openly of this. Now, he was a firm believer that he was visited by aliens often and even in his dreams, and that he would get downloads of information on how to build these various things that he was constructing. So, um, sorry if you can hear my dog in the background. Uh, so this guy that wrote this article thinks that he perished on the mountainside somewhere. And some of the speculations, of course, over what the bright light and the big boom sound was, is that it was a meteor passing through or a glimpse of a shooting star, it's like crazy ass explanations for it. But let me find. He's from Vancouver Island. There's been documentaries made about him. This happened in like 1980. And this man just straight up went missing. He was born and raised in the logging and fishing town of Duncan, British Columbia, which is like right on the shores of Vancouver. He was a very intelligent man. I don't know what these books are about. So, okay, here's some of his accomplishments. This goes to show just how intelligent he was. At the age of 14, he built a single cylinder automobile, which is now on display at Duncan's BC Forest Discovery Center. 3 years later, he rebuilt an abandoned bulldozer that professional heavy-duty mechanics had dismissed as unsalvageable. In his early 20s, he decided to resurrect a derelict steam locomotive that he had found rusting in the rainforest, with elder trees growing through the chassis. It took Granger 2 years to restore the train to full working order, whereupon he laid tracks for it through his parents' garden and began taking neighborhood children for rides in it. His workshop had become something of a local attraction. It seemed that there was no mechanical mystery too daunting for Granger Taylor, no kinetic conundrums that he couldn't conquer. 1969, about a half a year after Granger had finished hauling the last piece of his rusted train onto his parents' property, something strange took place at the local hospital, not too far from Granger's home. At about 5 o'clock in the morning, while tending to patients in the geriatric wing, 4 nurses working the night shift allegedly saw a silent, brilliantly lit flying saucer hovering outside the window about 3 stories off the ground near the children's ward. One of the nurses, Doreen Kendall, was some of the first to observe this object and um, claimed to have witnessed 2 humanoid pilots in the craft's cockpit through its transparent window. The nurses gazed in amazement as the craft drifted behind a grove of trees before zipping away to the night sky just like a shooting star. Later that morning and throughout the following night, many citizens all over Duncan and the surrounding area, including a handful of elementary school teachers and a pilot from the Royal Canadian Naval Air Service, had all came forward to report a similar looking UFO that had been spotted in the region. For months following this incident, flying saucers and visitors from outer space were the talk of the town in southwestern Vancouver Island. Now, it seems likely that Granger Taylor was bitten by the same UFO bug that had smitten so many of his fellow islanders in the early 70s. Not long after, he applied the finishing touches to his steam locomotive. He apparently developed an interest in the dynamics of air travel, earning his pilot's license and beginning restorative work on a scrapped World War II Kitty Hawk fighter plane, which he would eventually sell to a private collector for $20,000. By the 70s, Granger had wearied of conventional mechanics, which no longer seemed to challenge him. Instead, he turned his attention to the greatest aeronautical question of all, the propulsion of flying saucers. No engineer on Earth had yet been able to conceive an engine which could enable a huge metallic disc to maneuver as tightly, rapidly, and silently through the air as the flying saucers that were described by these UFO witnesses years ago. Granger Taylor decided to tackle this enigma, which had apparently baffled the most brilliant minds of military aerospace, and start on his magnum opus, the construction of a real-life flying saucer. Granger Taylor began his quest by building a private office, the same size and shape as the quintessential UFO. Aided by the children and teenagers who often came to watch him work, he scavenged 2 radio tower satellite dishes from the local dump and constructed a cylindrical building at the end of his parents' garden, which he erected on stilts. After decorating the sides of the metallic structure with a lightning bolt design, and a port-like window, he outfitted his UFO with cast iron wood burning stove, a couch, and a television. Finally, Granger stocked his new study with science fiction novels and pseudoscientific books on UFOs, which were intended to stimulate his ingenuity. His office complete, the mechanical genius hunkered down with his books and his notes and began to consider the question of UFO propulsion. Throughout 1979 and 1980, Granger Taylor spent much of his time alone in his backyard UFO, sitting in quiet contemplation or poring through his many books. Then, after many months of deep pondering, something extraordinary happened. One night, while laying in bed, Granger was reportedly contacted by extraterrestrials, very similarly to the way that the group of ladies that worked for Germany had been contacted by the Vril, which led them to having schematics and blueprints to build their own UFOs, which in turn Americans went and stole from them, which is part of what I said in the other video that I'm pretty sure lost, all the way back to, William Tompkins testified against his knowledge of blueprints that the Germans had on building UFOs that he and others had assisted in retrieving or stealing, however you want to look at that, from them, and then us building our own. And he even showed the prototypes where they had fashioned old submarines into the first flying aircraft that we had that was called a UFO. And our people, too, worked with alien beings that were known as Pleiadians. And that's all in his testimony, among many other. So important information add to this, okay? So according to Robert Keller, which was his good friend, a troubled teenager whom Granger had taken under his wing, and one of the few souls with whom he shared his incredible experience, Granger explained that beings from beyond our solar system had introduced themselves to him telepathically. Sound familiar? In the months preceding this incident, the machinist had attempted to contact extraterrestrials via a sort of radio that he had devised. Perhaps, he surmised, his willingness to communicate was what prompted the aliens to choose him. And yes, I agree. So Granger would go on to have several more alleged telepathic conversations with these extraterrestrials, downloads included. During these incidents, he repeatedly asked the aliens questions about the propulsion source of their saucer-like vehicles. But all they divulged was that the secret had something to do with magnetism. In October of 1980, an elated Granger, let me back up so you can look at that picture there for a minute, confided in Keller and another friend named Bob Nielsen that the aliens had invited him on a trip through the Milky Way galaxy. His younger friends couldn't entirely believe Granger's story, suspecting that the eccentric genius had simply experienced a strange dream or some sort of hallucination, but they couldn't entirely discount it either. If an extraterrestrial intelligence were to contact anyone on Earth, they believed that Granger would undoubtedly be one of their first choices, despite their earnest entreaties. Granger refused to take his eager friend with him on his upcoming interstellar voyage, claiming that they had too much to leave behind on Earth. He disclosed the aliens planned to pick him up on a rainy night so that the general public wouldn't see the spaceship. After about a month after this happened, and around November 29th, the town of Duncan was rocked by the newspapers that dubbed the storm of a century. Thunder, lightning, torrential rain, and gale-force winds descended upon the city, uprooting trees and downing power lines. At 6 p.m. that evening, right before the height of the storm, Granger Taylor paid a visit to Bob's Grill, one of his favorite places to go to, one of his favorite haunts. The waitress who served him noticed that Granger was clad in his usual attire, consisting of jeans, logging boots, and a brown knitted sweater. He didn't have a coat with him and was clearly ill prepared for the incoming tempest. At 6:30, the 32-year-old Granger Taylor paid for his bill, left the diner, and drove off in his 1972 light blue Datsun truck. He was never seen. Aha, that's what the blue Datsun truck picture is all about. Now we know. The following day, as the people of Duncan were busy clearing their roads and driveways of fallen trees and windblown debris, Taylor's parents discovered that their son was missing. Jim Taylor found Granger's last note to the world taped to his and Grace's bedroom door. This bizarre document read, "Dear Mother and Father, I have gone away to walk aboard an alien spaceship. As recurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe and then return. I am leaving behind all my possessions to you as I will no longer require the use of any. Please use the instructions in my will as a guide to help. Love, Granger." On the back of the note was a hand-drawn map, which some have interpreted as a depiction of Waterloo Mountain, located about 15 kilometers or 10 miles southwest of Taylor's home. Jim Taylor and his sons searched high and low for Granger, checking hospitals, driving lonely logging roads in the hope of finding some clue as to the whereabouts of their eccentric genius. In accordance with his notes, they looked through his will and found that he had replaced the word deceased with departed throughout the entire document. Try as they might, they could find no trace of the missing man nor his blue Datsun truck. Months turned into years, yet the fate of Granger Taylor remains as mysterious as it had been on that fateful morning of November 30th, 1980. On June 29th of 1983, the date of Granger's scheduled return from his trip through the cosmos, Granger's stepbrother Douglas Taylor, who worked with the Canadian Coast Guard at the time, set out for half the night on the deck of his patrol boat, scanning the night sky for any sign of Granger and his alien spaceship. I have chills. His heart was heavy when he turned in for the night, the promised ship having failed to appear. In April of 1986, 6 years after Granger's disappearance, a municipal work crews discovered an artificial crater several meters in diameter off Mount Prevost Road. On the slopes of either Mount Prevost or northeasterly Sickler Mountain, both of which overlook northwestern Duncan. Scattered in the vicinity of the crater were rusted and discolored fragments of what appeared to have once been a truck. The local Royal Canadian Mounted Police subsequently investigated the scene and discovered 2 shards of what proved to be human bone not far from the depression. Many Duncan residents, including the police and several members of Granger's family, believed that these bones constituted the last remains of Granger Taylor. As DNA profiling was in its infancy at that time and unavailable to the force on Vancouver Island, that suspicion was never definitively confirmed or refuted. In the wake of the sobering discovery, a number of theories were here on Earth. Many believe that on the night of November 28, 1980, Granger had packed his Datsun full of dynamite, which he used for removing tree stumps, driven into the wilderness, and either deliberately or accidentally blew himself and his vehicle to smithereens. Some people believe Granger's inability to solve the mystery of flying saucer propulsion had he eaten away at him during the long hours of self-imposed isolation that typified his final months. Unable to cope with his failure, he set out with the intention of taking his own life, concocting the tale of his interstellar voyage in an attempt to ease the pain of the friends and family he would leave behind. Some of those who knew him best, however, were adamant that Granger Taylor was not suicidal. If he did blow himself up with dynamite, then it must have been a complete accident. Perhaps he had brought dynamite into the wilderness with the intention of using it in some way to inform the extraterrestrial astronauts of his whereabouts, or to somehow facilitate his journey into outer space. Through some terrible accident, the explosives have detonated prematurely. Others still, including Granger's late mother, Grace, and his friend Robert Keller, believe that Granger Taylor was indeed picked up by extraterrestrials on that stormy November night, just like he said he would be. Perhaps he is still hurtling through outer space in an alien spacecraft, exploring the galaxy and studying alien astronauts to his heart's content. After all, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, time dilates for objects traveling near the speed of light. Perhaps one day, as 35-year-old Granger Taylor will return from his 42-month voyage to find a very different Duncan to the one that he left behind, where phones are cordless, cars drive on their own, and residents still puzzle over the fate of that quirky genius who disappeared on a stormy night so long ago. Now, speaking of people who go missing mysteriously and disappearing, we have many people in America alone who go missing in national parks and on hiking trails all the time. This is Karen Sykes, who was a very, very renowned, very well experienced hiker. She was 70 years old when she went missing, but in very good physical condition and very well versed at hiking trails in 3 or 4 different states. She wrote for 2 separate papers, as did her boyfriend, and they were out this day on the lower, more flat version of Mount Rainier when she went missing. Her boyfriend needed to sit and take a break for a moment. She was still feeling quite exuberant and not winded yet. So she told him she was going to just go ahead a few paces just to scope out the area because they were actually there to take photographs of the area for an article that she was writing on hiking in that area. They also both were very skilled and knowledgeable about survival and different things. And when they were out there that day, they had packed their bags to prepare for needing extra food, needing extra water, or even in the some chance that they would need to stay overnight because the temperatures there drop quite drastically, below zero actually, below freezing. So the boyfriend says she was only gone about 10 to 20 minutes, and he began to get worried, so he got up and started looking for her. There's no way she would have went off these trails, and even if she did, they would have been able to see her because all of the surrounding area was wildflowers and prairie type area. They're actually much lower on the mountain than most people would go for hiking trails, and definitely much lower on the mountain than most people that go missing would be located at. Now, to cut this long story short, I'm going to give you the gist of it. I sent out all the search rescue teams, had a couple of canine units, even used aircraft and aerial view to try to spot and locate her. They felt pretty sure that they were going to find her within the first 12 hours. She went missing so early in the day that they had plenty of daylight, that they felt very confident that they would find her before dark, before it got cold. And then they didn't. The original search area was approximately a 5-mile radius. They expanded that out about years later to about 15 miles radius. And then the search was actually called off when a female, older person's body was actually found to be on the 15-mile radius point, until they could do a proper autopsy to see if they could identify her, because the body was so badly decomposed and disfigured at that point that no one could have just looked at her to identify her. Now, interestingly enough, where this body was found was a very remote area with very steep, treacherous terrain. It's not somewhere that people would go walking or hiking in because of the brush and the craggy old rocks and the steep incline and such. So no one could understand why any person would be found there at all. First of all, and second of all, when they did find this person in their body, this person's body, they did not find hardly any supplies with them whatsoever. So that too is strange and mysterious because none of her belongings that she had with her, her backpack, were ever found. And they did confirm through DNA that this was indeed her body, if I remember reading the stories correctly. However, my point to bringing up Karen Sykes is that she's a very knowledgeable, skilled survivalist and hiker. She wrote for journals and blogs and published several books of her own and co-authored books on the topic. And yet still she went missing and somehow was veered way off track and found in a very remote, hard to navigate area. And so that brings my awareness and questions back to our cousins or whatever they are, that the indigenous peoples all over the world for decades, if not centuries, have told us about the hairy man or the wild man or the Sasquatch. Native Americans have a different word. It's not even Sasquatch. I can't think of what it is. This so weedy or something like that. But they tell these stories of how they will steal your women and your children. And many of these people that go missing in these national parks and these hiking trails along the mountains like Mount Rainier. A lot of people go missing on Mount Rainier alone. Um, but some people are found very far off from where they got lost, where they disappeared from. And so you have to wonder, did a Neanderthal or Bigfoot or whatever the hell these things are get a hold of them and pack them off somewhere? Or did they end up stepping into some type of magnetic anomaly on the planet? Because as well, could out one spot and spit them out in another. That be that far of a travel for a wormhole. You can be popped out 15, 20 miles away or all the way across the freaking world. Einstein's already proved that with his theories of relativity. And bringing out through other studies of wormholes that we're doing. So, I mean, you have to ask yourselves, and even are the two related? Because who's not to say? I mean, look at all of these hot spots, all of this red and dark pinks and purples. This is magnetic anomalies across the United States alone. Okay, that's a lot. There's a lot of them, and the Bigfoot people have been associated with disappearing without a trace themselves, and even orbs being around them. So again, serious inquiry needs to be dedicated to these types of things so that we can get to the bottom of some of these completely unexplained mysteries at this time that are all relatable, that are all seemingly connected in some way or another. And interestingly enough, I would again bring your attention back to Karen Sykes, who I want to put a face to make this more relatable. I want to put a face to these stories of these missing people. This was a 70-year-old woman who was in great condition and of good sound mind, physical condition, and experience, and came well prepared, not ill prepared, well prepared. And when they found this lady's body, the coroner determined that she died of a heart attack and also was suffering from hypothermia. And again, none of her gear was with her to prevent her from having hypothermia. And what did she see or experience that caused that heart attack? Because she was in very good health. She was in a very good, healthy condition. And so, again, we should be thinking about what else is out there that we don't know about or that most don't know about, and give it the credibility and the attention that it is commanding and the respect that is necessary to do this in a proper scientific way without bias and without limitations. The science is supposed to be about going with the principles we know until we learn something further. It's not to keep it in a box. It's not to become a religion. We need to expand further and learn further about these mysteries that lurk on our planet, that create these anomalies where people go missing or other things show up in our reality, so that we can better understand and better protect ourselves and each other. They deserve respectful, intentional scientific study. And if you like these videos, I hope you will give us a big old thumbs up. And whether you are new here or a returning subscriber, I am ever so grateful for being able to produce this knowledge in a way that makes you think further and expand your mind. And I thank you for being with me. Have a great night.